everyone, I'm just here to share my thoughts on Xuan Li and Gianc. I'll very shortly talk about what they do in PvE, their shells, and mostly focus on how to draft them in PvP in turn 1 and turn 2 drafts, because Xuan Li and Gianc can be played quite nicely into both T1 and T2. A short disclaimer, my experience playing Xuan Li and Gianc is mostly in the low mythic uh, range, from like 3.1 to 3.1 to 3.3k, because I only recently hit mythic 2, so my experience probably differs from the top players. I'll take Doomcrow on Momentum, Unbreakable, and Fury Age over Golden Lion, and then over Artisan. But for newer players, Artisan might be more valuable since it's the first mythic shell they unlock. For Threshold, I can easily see her being a hyper carry for Terramaton and Aurora because she outputs good damage. For Doki Doki, I think she's still viable because she gives free time for the whole team. Lattice investment wise, for both PvP and PvE, I would recommend S3 first, then her S1. Her S3 is needed because it increases the duration of Jade Empire to 3 turns and the assist rate to 100%. S1 is very neat to have because of the increase in damage. For PvP, I will still recommend Doomcrow, but this time on Swift Rush, Bloodbath, Fury Age, or Swift Rush, Unbreakable, Fury Age. Unbreakable would play well with Vel because of the extra shield she receives, but Bloodbath will definitely be more versatile because you can play into Cleave. Alternatives are Moon Bunny and Ember. For Moon Bunny, it's nice to have because it helps her take a turn. I would like to run her on Swift, just to make sure she gets that S3 down, but you can feel your damage really tanking. Same problem with Ember, you probably want to be playing Swift as some sort of trap in GVG, or you can just play Swift Bloodbath Swift. But I find Swift Bloodbath Swift. But I find Ember to be largely useless in RTA because if she's dead after she casts her S3, she becomes a useless unit after coming out of Ice State. If Ember procs right off the bat, then your whole team is probably dead to begin with. So, yeah. When drafting Xuan Li, the key thing to keep in mind is that she has to proc her S3. So when drafting her into T1 comps, you generally want to lockpick a unit that will enable her to take the turn. For example, lockpicking Turandot, like Kofi here, Doki, Freya. Other units can be like Plume, Aya, Mio that can cut in and take or push back and take to make your Xuan Li take a turn. Playing her into T1 is pretty straightforward because she just wipes the whole enemy. I just put this replay from a random battle report where she just goes ham on the entire enemy team. Although Nervet applies buff block here, Xuan Li is also a pretty good counter to Valerian because her Doomcrow follow-up attacks don't count towards the shield provided by Valerian. Plus the damage she does is decent, so she actually can burst down Valerian shield. Yep. You can see how Ray just gets melted by Xuan Li and this game. On the other hand, for T2, because you want her to have an S3 to survive to pop her S3, you generally want units like Valerian, Osania, and heck, even Viper. There are some people drafting Link here, but the one that caught my attention the most is Yue drafting Viper. Like here, and Viper synergizes quite well with Xuan Li because his passive reduces the damage taken, plus he can apply speed down on the entire enemy team. So relative to them, right, your team can act faster, Xuan Li can get more turns and just smack everyone. can see how fast the Ray Mary still gets bursted down, even though this Xuan Li is on Bloodbath. And you can see how Bloodbath is way more versatile as a draft because he can easily just play into Cleave rather than playing Unbreakable, which might still try and have to send you just one tap your Xuan Li. Sana is also another good pick with Xuan Li because her S1 allows her to act like crazy fast and cycle Xuan Li's attacks more. Plus, her revive can also come in clutch sometimes. It also helps that she's a defense scaling unit, so Sana heals her up to full almost every single time. Next is Gianc. He's a character with a very straightforward kit. He does damage to you, and he heals up when he hits you. In PvE, I don't see much use for him, unless you want to take 10 minutes to clear each stage, like Tiamat back in the days. But in PvP, that's where he truly shines. So, shells wise, I can recommend Jackal, Gator, and Gigabyte. Basically anything with Wellspring, because of his S1 passive that has follow-up rate scale to his max HP at the start of the battle. So, Jackal is an obvious candidate because his S1 honestly hits quite hard. I would recommend either Wellspring, Wellspring, Swift Rush, Swift Smite, or Balwak, Wellspring, Swift Smite. Bloodbath Wellspring is a bit overkill in my opinion, but it's also viable. Same thing goes for Gator. I would recommend Balwak, Wellspring, Ether Plague, or Wellspring, Bramble, Ether Plague. Strife is also viable. And lastly, Gigabyte also has Wellspring, so you can run Strife, Wellspring, Ether Plague, or Swift Rush, Wellspring, Ether Plague. Anything goes. But in general, you see Jackal being played more into turn 1 comps. But let's focus on the T2 aspect of him first. So as a T2 unit, Gianc doesn't really do much. He's rather independent from the team, and he doesn't really synergize well with anyone. However, he is a unit you want to draft when you notice that the comp easily runs out of steam. It doesn't have enough momentum to clear everything in one shot, and it just like dies out after. So an example would be this comp Fia, Santik, Freya, Senyu. You notice that it doesn't really have, it's like a one pump and done kind of comp. So he doesn't have enough momentum to carry on the cleave after his initial setup. This Gianc just surviving the cleave easily, and we just take out the units one by one right after. Because of how comprehensive his kit is, like self-sustaining, because he has heals inbuilt into him, Gianc beats any character in a 1v1. And this game, because his heals are gone. So next question would be, what's the difference between him and Tiamat then? Because both can be easily played into Cleave, and Tiamat was our premier option against Cleave in Season 0. I would think of it as Tiamat is more of a win condition, whereas Gianc is more like a lose condition for them. Gianc is more like a unit, Gianc that is drafted in a T2 comp against a T1 comp is more like a unit you draft reactively rather than Tiamat being drafted to kill everything. Because if you try to draft Gianc against a super aggressive comp with enough firepower like Yeli and Messiah, you will lose. In these sort of comps, ultimately if your Tiamat manages to cut in, she's still better because she can actually kill the enemies. And you notice that because this comp has Valerian in it, they can actually out sustain my Gianc because Gianc doesn't actually do that much damage. This was just ridiculous. But yes, you can see how I lost from here. Because I did not have enough firepower to take out his cleavers, while his cleavers could just continue cleaving. And eventually his Messiah S3 comes back out, his Yearly S3 comes back out. I lose. Another thing to note is that Tiamat would fare much better against comps like Keto, Santic, Turandot, Plume, because she's not so reliant on her S2 and S3. She outputs way more damage than Gianc does, and she can cut in to actually stop the enemy from continue cycling their Ketos and Santic and Turandot. So ultimately, Gianc, if you are playing in a tank down comp, it's about out sustaining them when they have no when they tend to have zero sustain, so that the damage he deals actually matters. But what if you're playing him into a T1 comp? Playing him into a T1 comp is very viable because of his S3. It acts somewhat like a Lilium, where you can play Ray and Gianc together to even kill T2 comps. So there was this replay where I managed to snipe down his low one because of Gianc and Ray to play together. Yep, and this game. So if you're playing Gianc into a T1 draft, you really want him to act first so that he can pop his S3, which scales off current max HP, and then afterwards you can follow up with a Fia, a Lilium, a Ray, a Messiah, any sort of cleaver to clean up the rest of the team. So in this case, you will want Jackal to get the speed up. For T1 comps, definitely Jackal is a play. Maybe in some cases you want Gator so that you can quickly follow up, since Gator can also proc off enemies' deaths. Alright, this marks the end of my yapping. I'm sorry for my disorganized thoughts, but I hope that this has given you a clearer idea of how to draft Gianc and Xuan Li into what situations, and perhaps even new ideas of drafting them into certain team comps.